Now let's take a look at the different types of columns that are available to us when we go to create a new table. In this movie, we're going to look at the string columns. That is, those types of columns that contain alphanumeric data. Before we do that, however, we're going to introduce two new SQL statements, the select and insert statements, that will allow us to view and add data from our tables. First of all, let's use the database we created earlier on, and there's only one table so far in the database, and that's the fruits table. We can use the select statement to view the data from the fruits table. The syntax for the select statement is, first of all, the select keyword, followed by the name of the column or columns that we wish to view from the fruits table. We can use an asterisk if we want to view all the columns from the table. Then we specify from and then the table name, in this case fruits, followed by a semicolon. As we can see, empty set, there's no data at all in the fruits table because we've only just created it. We can use the insert statement to add data to the fruits table. The syntax for that is insert into and the table name, then the keyword values, then we put whatever values we wish to add. Now, it's expecting alphanumeric data, so we enclose that within quote marks. And we enclose all the values within a pair of brackets. So in this case, apple, comma, green, the different values are separated by commas, and then once we've put all the values into the fruits table that we wish to add, we close the brackets and use a semicolon. So now, when we go back to viewing the data from the fruits table with the select statement, we'll see that there are two values which form one row in the table, apple and green. The column names are given at the top, and then all the data is listed underneath that. In this case, however, there's only one row. We'll be looking at the select and insert statements in more detail later on in this chapter. For now, let's have a look at another create table statement, and we're going to create a table called sample, and this table is only going to have one column for now, and that's going to be col1. We're going to make this a char type of column, and you may have noticed when we created the fruits table that that's the type that we used for those two columns as well. Both name and color columns in the fruits table are char columns. When we created the fruits table, we also included a size in brackets straight after the table type, in this case char. If we leave that out, then it can produce some interesting results. Let's say we create the table sample, and then we try to use an insert statement to add a value into the sample table. Now, because it only has one column, the insert statement only expects one value. In this case, we're going to say abracadabra. However, when we go to view the data from the sample table, it's only stored the first letter of that value that we tried to add. Now the reason for that is when we specify a char type of column, but we don't specify length, MySQL will assume that we mean a char column with a length of 1. So every piece of data that is put into the column can only be 1 character long. In this case, A. It'll take the first character. So we've effectively created a pretty useless column unless for some reason we wanted to only store values with one letter long. You'll notice that when we try to add a value that's too long into the table, we don't get an error message. It just truncates the string that we've tried to add and tells us that the query worked okay. Let's remove the sample table and start again. In order to remove the table, we use a command called drop table, and this is another SQL command. Drop table sample. Now we go to look at the different kinds of tables available in the fruit database. We can see that fruits is the only table. The sample database is gone as if it had never been there. I can't emphasize enough what a dangerous command drop table is, and how at the single command we can remove an entire table with however much data we've put onto it and however valuable that data is, wiped away as if it was never there. So we need to be absolutely sure when we use the drop table command that we're doing what we think we're doing and we're not losing any of our valuable data. The reason we used it just now is so that we could create the table again. We're going to create the table again with col 1 rather, just as before, and we're going to specify it's a char and it's going to be a size of 20. I'm going to put a comma in and add another column. And this one's not going to be a char, this one's going to be a varchar. That's going to be 20 long as well. Now, the difference between char and varchar, which stands for character variable, is that while char will store exactly 20 characters no matter how much it's given, varchar will store the number of characters that we specified when we used an insert statement to add some data. So varchar will take up slightly less hard disk space, whereas char will always take up the same amount however much data we put in using our insert statement. The payoff is that the char is much quicker, the char column is much quicker to access than a character variable or a varchar column. The other main types of string column that we can use are text, and we'll create a column 3, and that's going to be a text, and we don't need to specify a size for the text. Now, a text works rather similarly to a character variable or varchar column in that it will store exactly the amount of data that it's given, rather than adding a set of spaces at the end as the char column does to get it to the right amount. So this is a more efficient way of storing pieces of data that can be widely varying. The reason we don't specify a length for the text column is that there are a number of different flavors of text column which specify the size that the text column will take up. For instance, the text column on its own will store 64K. If we use a tiny text, then it will store a maximum of 255 bytes, which is quite a small amount. Medium text will store 16 megabytes, quite a lot of data there, and a long text will store a maximum of 4 gigabytes. So that's quite a broad range of different sizes for the text type. A final kind of string column is the blob. Blob is very similar to the text column, except that a blob column, and blob stands for binary large object, is case insensitive. So it won't tell a difference between A's and lowercase a's, a text column that is, whereas a binary large object will pick up all the differences between capital A's and small a's when we're doing comparisons between values on a table. That will become relevant later on. Suffice it to say for now that these are the different kinds of string columns that we can use when we're creating a table. In our next movie, we're going to take a look at numeric columns and date column types.